2024 was an incredible year for the No Gray Areas podcast, filled with impactful stories and valuable lessons. Let's take a look back at some of the best moments and highlights that defined this year of 2024.
I'd start with just the power of just writing down that resolution. You know, so many people will, they'll have a toast and they'll maybe go around the room and share a resolution that they've got for the new year. Mm-hmm. But taking some time to write down that resolution, that's powerful itself. Just something to reference back to and articulating your thoughts on paper.
And studies prove how true that is.
Yes. Yeah, very powerful. So the goal session starts with some planning.
Yeah.
And I'll use myself as the employee and I'll use my own personal goal sessions attending with my direct manager. At the beginning of each year, leading up to the new year, I will sit down and I'll make a list of goals of things that I'm looking to accomplish personally and professionally in the coming month, in the coming year. We'll take a longer term look at what a 3-year goal might be. And then one of my favorite lists, if you will, are someday goals or my someday goals. And the someday goals, I think for lack of better description, might be the bucket list, list items. And what's been so neat about this process is getting my entire family involved with goal setting. So I will not
go... So they're speaking into your someday goals.
Yes, yeah. Influencing the someday goals. My wife and I actually sit down in December and we outline what we want to accomplish as a couple and as a family, specifically in the upcoming year. And then we'll revisit our 3-year and our someday goals as well to see if there's a different direction we want to go.
And that's why the name of your program is so powerful, because it takes people back to the choices they make, and that those choices create ripples, and some of those ripples will go on forever.
Yeah.
And we don't realize that.
Yeah.
I remember I had a man come up to me one time, not come up to me, I met him, and he said, "I can't believe that I let an 18-year-old boy make decisions that shaped the course of my life." And I thought, well, that's a stupid thing. Why would you do that? And then I realized he was talking about himself, that he made decisions at an 18-year-old that set him on a track for his life. And he's looking back on it now.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what you're saying with your show.
Well, and Daryl, I read a statistic recently, and I'm probably going to goof up the percentage, but I know it's a high percentage. It said something like 70% of our life decisions will be made between like 18 and 25. Mm-hmm. We're going to make a lot of decisions, but those are formative years. And so what that man said was, man, that's so deep and wise, isn't it? But I would say to anybody who's 18 to 25 or 18 to 30 or so, for them to really think through the decisions you're making are going to have a massive impact on your future.
Yeah, very definitely.
Yeah.
I think if people have what most of us call a victim mentality, that we really don't have any power, that is an emaciated, weak posture to take, where, well, it's kind of que sera, sera. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. No. Yeah. Empower yourself. Yeah. You can by your choices. I could have chosen anyone, like marriage, let's say, as an example. Some people say, well, there's only one. I don't believe that. And nor do I think that's romantic. Yeah. How do you, after you get married, if there was only one, you get into a big fight.
She's clearly not the one.
And you go, I didn't really have a choice. I don't even want to be here, but you were the one.
Yeah.
That's not nearly as romantic as waking up every day of my life and saying, I choose you all over again. There is power in choice.
For better or for worse. We're in a worse moment right now, and I'm still choosing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're right.
There's power in it. Right, it is.
Yeah.
So people who say, my choices really don't matter, that is one. Go read through the book of Proverbs. That's one of the most foolish ways to live this life. Your choices, in many ways, dictate the outcome of your life. So when things take a dark turn, I don't like to just look and go, oh, well, it's the enemy. We don't wrestle against flesh and blood, which is, of course, Ephesians 6.
Yeah.
But I had a role to play. Somebody didn't just get me here. I had a role to play.
It's like James says, where it says you were led astray into sin.
Absolutely.
So
James.
you made a choice to do that.
100%. So I just think we have to be very mindful that our choices aren't idols. We don't idolize the power of choice, but we take seriously the responsibility of all of our choices. What I say to my children is a choice. I can use words to harm. Scripture is clear. The power of life and death is in my tongue. I have a choice. Every choice I make has an outcome. What outcome do I want? Whatever outcome I want, then I need to rewind and go, then I need to make this choice.
I live by what I call the laws of transformation. And the laws of transformation are, number one, who am I? Knowing ourselves deeply. You mentioned that earlier. We've got to know what's written on that needle.
Yeah.
And we've got to know who we are and where we are. It's imperative. And I do that in my coaching. I start with that. Let's get to know who you are deeply. I've spent a lifetime doing that. The next piece is, what do we want? And I hope I'm saying, God, where do you want me, right? The next piece too is, why do we want it? And asking God why. God, why do you want me there is okay. We might not hear it, but it's okay to ask. And then the next part is, what am I doing to get in the way? What am I doing to sabotage this? I have to know that. So where am I? What do I want? And I'm bringing God into all this. Why? And what am I doing to sabotage?
If you guys, are followers of Christ, he will ask you to do things you do not want to do. And weird things
that's so true,
or
isn't
odd
it?
things that you're like,
It makes you uncomfortable, right?
Oh yeah. Go talk to that person, or just go feed that person. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is really weird, like embarrassing. This person doesn't know me. They're standing on a corner. Like, who am I, right? But when I really started listening to that still small voice, the miraculous things that came from it, just the fulfillment, just the peace, the joy, the love, the kindness that I received from doing those things for other people filled my whole life. And I, at that moment, was like, that's why I said, if you use me, however you see fit, use me, and I will follow you.
Yeah.
Because he showed me all of these things after I started listening, that I said, I will not deny you. And so when he told me to do that, of course, in my mind, right, this is so bizarre that this could even work, that this could even really happen. But like you said, that listening and obeying, that's all I wanted to do. So I knew that if I just did that I would reap the benefits.
I don't mean to sound corny, I really don't, but this is true. I felt as an American, this is something I had to do. And I saw it as important because if not me, then who? Right?
Yeah.
There's no one else who's going to, number one. And number two, we're not talking a petty crime. We're talking a crime against our country and our national security. And so the one instance that happened was my criminal lawyer said to me, I turned to him and I said, I don't see how I can do this. And he said, Ashley, I don't see how you can't. And when he said that, something about that flipped the switch for me. And I knew that I had to go. And so he set up a meeting with the FBI, and I ended up telling them for 2 straight days everything I knew, all the players, all the shell entities, and laid it out for them for 2 straight days.
Wow. What I love is, I think on your website it talks about this, and maybe in the foreword of the book that it says something about what is easy is not always right.
Right.
And again, this is where our audience, myself, we can resonate with your story. Not in the same situation as you were in by any means, but we've all been in some of those situations where we have to make a choice, and it may not be an easy choice.
Right.
But I think that actually describes what heroes do, right? We love watching movies or reading books about heroes. And what they do is they usually, in the face of conflict, in the face of something that feels overwhelming, and in the face of making a decision that's going to make their life like yours, from this point on, my life will never be the same. They make the right decision.
And what's interesting, I try and tell people, I now speak on this whole idea of getting off the X and the overcome mindset and how we deal with adversity and the end moments becoming new beginnings. And what I explain to people is, man, be thankful for the hard times you're going through, because the reality is they tee you up for success for future hard moments. No different than training muscles, no different. An overcome mindset has to be built by doing hard things and by going through hard things. So The interesting thing, when I was wounded, fast forward, a few years, I said, hey man, yes, this sucks, but guess what? You just walked the hardest path. You climbed out of the darkest hole you've ever been in. This is going to be no different. You're going to apply all these lessons in leadership that you've been applying, you're going to apply them to this.
Wow.
And so it really didn't change anything. And that's what so many people have asked, how did you do that? How did you launch out of your injuries, the sign on the door? And I never looked back. And that's why.
Yeah.
It's because I had failed at this colossal level, but I didn't let it define me. I let it become a moment to grow and get better.
Jason, I am so glad you brought that up, because I wanted to go to the sign next, but you actually gave all this backstory that really helps us understand the sign. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because this podcast, as you may know, is all about the power and complexity of human choice. That as humans, I believe, as a person of faith, that we are the pinnacle of God's creation, but we've been given the power of choice. We get to choose. But what that means is that we make our choices, and eventually our choices make us. So you shared a part of your story where you were making some really poor choices in your life, but that you didn't let that define you. You didn't let that be the end of the story. What are your thoughts on that? This idea that we make our choices and eventually our choices make us.
It is a mystery how this all works together. Let me start there. I wake up today. The listeners wake up today, and we have choices to make.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would simply bring it into our own experience and realize that we can make that we are conscious actors who make decisions. There can be, path A, B, C, D. Actually, there are quite a few choices out there. It's rarely maybe just a fork in the road. And I think for us to look at this element of choice as a blessing, that God has delegated to us decisions who would not have to do it that way.
Yeah, that's true.
And so here we are not machines. We are not automatons. We are able to look at our situation. He's given us minds to think. And so that is a blessing, and it's an expression of trust and love on the part of our Creator.
Most decisions that we make as human beings, we got the simple ones. Am I going to turn right or left?
Right.
But we talk about the big ones. There's a lot of complexity in there. So give us some tangible thoughts.
I got to go back to the book. I mentioned about one of the first things was the counseling.
Yes.
But the second thing was actually the mentorship. So when I talk about mentorship, I've had so many people in my life that I could draw from to make great decisions by asking questions. So just a tangible thing to, like saying, getting to be where you're making good decisions is being able to ask good questions and, open your mouth. And it doesn't cost you anything. My people used to always say that asking questions doesn't cost anything, and the only bad question is a question not asked.
Yeah.
And so, I've always...
Let me just interrupt for a moment here. There's a reverse side to that, though, isn't there? I love that you said that. It doesn't cost you anything to ask a question. It might cost you not to ask that question, though, correct?
Oh, man, correct. Yeah, and like you said, it might cost you everything not to ask that question, And so yeah, I've always asked a lot of questions, and so I would just tell somebody in a tangible way to ask questions if you don't know anything, or if you definitely don't know it, there's so many things out here where you can research and you can find the answers, for yourself.
One of the other things that you brought up when we were talking the other day is the danger of asking why. But don't ask why. I think this is a really important one to unpack. Now, again, for our own personal lives, I want our audience to, what Tim's going to explain here about why we shouldn't ask our kids why when they go through a difficult or something. Take that to heart about even leading yourself, because I think it's natural. This is what you hear parents do it all the time, don't you? Something happens and you go, why did you do that? And you're saying that's a dangerous question. So tell us why.
So if I ask why, I'm most of the time putting my kid on the defense,
and I'm asking them to come up with an answer that maybe doesn't exist. How many times have you watched your kid do something that was brainless anyways? It involved no thought whatsoever. They reacted on an emotion, on spur of the moment, just jump in and see what happens. I have a son that does that still to this day, and he's a little bit older than a teenager. And asking him why, he doesn't know the answer to that question. He just did it.
Yeah, if he knew the answer, he probably wouldn't have done it.
Right. So asking why often will require him or her to either fabricate the answer or get really defensive. Now, if they're in that mindset, they're not in any position to learn from the poor choice that they just made or the mistake that they just jumped into. To me, it's better to say, to summarize, from my perspective, it looks like you've done this X, Y, Z. I got that right? What are you going to do about it? How are you going to fix that? It automatically starts creating this, have you ever seen, two kind of diodes together? I may not be using the right term, and electricity is kind of jumping across, right?
Yep.
That's what you want to create in them. And immediately, mistake, jump across to a possible solution.
What am I going to do about it?
So now I'm teaching my child, not what excuse can I come up with? What would make this sound? Because every time a kid tells why they did something, it always minimizes their responsibility. So why even put that on the table? Let's just talk about how are you going to solve that? What do you think you need to do? How would you resolve that issue?
I spend most of my time now talking with people about being the greatest version of themselves and what that means. And it sounds really hokey and really complicated, but it's actually really simple. Most people struggle with it because of it could be fear. The fear of being great is really powerful. And many people struggle because they just don't know how to do it. And so I talk to people about that. That's what I've really learned. I've learned about teaching people about things like time management and health and wellness and, what's your educational goal? What's the pathway? What's your financial plan? Blah, blah, blah. And then you get into complicated stuff like, what's your brand? What's your brand, man? Who are you? What are you trying to do? What's your legacy going to be? And so I talk to people about this kind of stuff.
That is such a powerful question, that last one, isn't it?
Yeah. So I take people through the whole journey, right? That's near the end of sort of this greatness journey. But you'd be surprised, and maybe you wouldn't be surprised. I am shocked when I talk to young, high-functioning, super bright, professional people who have no plan.
Yeah.
And then you get past that, and then you start to ask questions like, what do you really want to be doing?
Yeah.
I know you're doing X, but what's in your soul that you want to do?
Yeah.
And why aren't you doing it?
Yeah.
That's a tough question too.
Where do you think people lose that? Because I think most of us, when we're little children, we don't know ourselves well at the time, but we're dreamers. We're imagining. We're like, I want to do this. I want to do this. And it doesn't matter who tells you, well, that's impossible. But somewhere along the line, we kind of lose that, don't we?
We do.
Where do you think that is, or why?
Well, again, I think it's two reasons, right? Either fear, right? It's the fear. And many times it's fear of judgment. And that is when you start acting differently around your loved ones and you say things like, I am going to be great. I am going to change the world. They're like, no, you're just little Simon, the third of three boys from a small town in Canada. How can you possibly say that you're going to be great?
Yeah.
And it's not their fault, but we listen to those voices and they sort of tug us down and tug us back.
Yeah. I
So
think you're right.
So that's one thing, right? When you start acting different and you get judgment, and then that little voice in your head goes, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing that. F that.
Yeah.
I think fear of success is just as big in some ways as a fear of failure. Because what I have seen personally is that that's where you get to really, really see how much you care about other people's opinions of you. And you get to see how well your communication skills are too. Because if that's within the house, you have to let that spouse know, we're doing it together. I love you. We're on this. I'm not going to leave you.
Yeah.
I'm still me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But if you can't have those conversations, those very vulnerable, open conversations, and you start realizing, well, what is this going to look like, and what is someone going to say about my social media page, and what is someone going to say? Well, then you really care more about others' opinions of you than you do about what's going on in here.
Do you think that's where fear of success comes from?
I think that's the most common one I've seen.
Yeah.
But it probably manifests itself in many, many different ways. Maybe, can I handle it? A lot of it's just the unknown. What does this look like?
Yeah.
Right? Like, what does this look like? Do I move?
Because the unknown's uncomfortable.
Yeah, but the people that are attracted to my message or my coaching, and it tends to be a lot more about other people's opinions for their success thing.
Our audience now, they're listening, they're going, I get it, I've been there, I've crashed, or I feel the stress and anxiety you're talking about. What are some things you learned about how we deal with this?
Well, I think first of all, the first thing I had to identify was, what was my normal pattern of stress? How did it show up in me? There's typically 4 different ways it shows up. It'll show up in fight. You've probably heard a couple of these before. They fight. So we'll just fight to win, no matter what. Some people are fighters and some people are fleers. They'll freeze or flee. They'll go the opposite direction. They'll try to avoid it rather than deal with it. That's just as unhealthy. But then there's the overcompensate people. People who have a self-image issue, who have to prove that they're worth whatever people think they're not worth. And so they'll throw themselves in situations that they have no skill. Just so you know, I was the worship leader at Sun Valley for 3 years. I was a prison singer, always behind a few bars, never had the right key. I could truly make a joyful noise to the Lord.
But it was just a noise.
I jumped in because there was no one else to do it. I didn't want people to feel, think negatively about me. At least they would say, well, Scott's doing the best he can. So I wouldn't be a part of the problem. So that was overcompensating. And then the last one is overcomplicating. It's this idea. So Patrick, you and I are having a conversation. I mentioned something to you that maybe hurt you a little bit. And then someone else, you have a conversation later on today, and someone else comes and they say something to you. It's like, oh, that sounded pretty familiar to what Scott said. I bet Scott and this person are actually talking to each other. And you start to create this spiral down because you think the whole world is against me. Think about Elijah in the Bible. I'm the only one who's left. And, that kind of thing. That overcomplicate ties everything together as if everyone's against me, including God. And
you start writing a story. You start writing a story that's not necessarily there, or you don't know if it's.
And
there
it could be a self-fulfilling prophecy if you're not if you're not careful, because you begin again. Our choices result in our actions.
Yeah.
And our beliefs about what God thinks about us, what others think about us, they impact our choices and our actions. So, yeah, it's a spiral down. Everyone's against me, and then all of a sudden everyone's either a victim or a villain. It's a dangerous place to be.
What is an imposter syndrome that you're still struggling with? You're not running as an athlete anymore, but what is your negative self-talk telling you now that you have to, when you're journaling and spending some time alone with God, that you have to try to put down?
I mean, this is a great question right now. Like I told you, we just came back from conference.
Yeah.
So in our conference meet we didn't perform where we needed to. So for me as a coach, clearly we evaluate the athletes, but you also have to evaluate yourself. So for me, it's like, okay, am I supposed to be in the profession? Like, hey, I got to step up my recruiting game. Maybe I'm not good enough. So those kind of self-doubts come in for me as a coach, because a part of our job is recruiting. So we have to recruit the right athletes. We have to be able to make those connections to get them to come to the school, but also we have to coach them when they get here.
Yeah.
So that's definitely right now self-doubt as far as just life and what I'm dealing with right now.
What about you, Brent?
Yeah, for sure.
Do you have any imposter syndrome?
Not at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
no. I would say the one that I probably have dealt with, and I'm using the word dealt as in past tense, okay? But it's this idea of being an insufficient leader. And one of the reasons why I think I got caught up on being an insufficient leader is because I found myself just being too anxious. right? I haven't accomplished enough, haven't done enough, haven't led enough. And one of
See
the
what
pictures,
you just did there.
right?
That's that self-talk. You
It's
start
the
listing the things I haven't.
Correct.
And whether it's an athlete, a coach, a pastor,
correct.
All of our listeners have those I haven't.
Correct.
Right? So keep going.
So essentially, I'll give you two analogies. One, there's this moment where Jacob wrestles with God.
Yeah.
And he says, man, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me indeed. So a part of me overcoming my inability and feeling like an insufficient leader, I've had to wrestle with the Lord to have him literally say, hey, I can't keep living like this. I can't keep going down this road. Like, you got to help me overcome this, and I'm not going to let you go till you bless me indeed. So that's one thing. And I remember there was a window where I was, I don't know, in a 48-hour period where I was running on maybe 4 hours of sleep, like literally just wrestling with the Lord. But then secondly, here's a picture that the Lord just kind of gave me as far as what it looked like for me to walk in this imposter syndrome. So my pace in my mind was doing this. And then one day it was very simple. He was like, you just need to settle. And settle looks like this. Right? And then as this is going on, here's, instead of me listening to the thoughts of the enemy, I have to remind myself that, number one, God is sovereign. So where I am right now in this moment, he knew I would be there from the very beginning of time. So I'm not insufficient. This isn't catching him by surprise. It's just catching me by surprise. Number two, I don't have to stay here. I can continue to grow, but I don't have to make anything happen. I just have to trust his plan, walk in obedience, keep clean hands and a pure heart. Now I'm listening to a different voice, which is really scripture. Yeah. And all this is helping me do is just, I can be settled.
It has been an unexpected blessing of, something that I don't think anyone grows up being like, yeah, I want to be part of a blended family. I want to be a stepmom. Like, that's not something that I think any woman would ever say. But there is definitely some beauty in that. Yeah.
You know what's interesting? Yeah. I'm not a step parent. Didn't have step parents, but I think I learned a lot just through observation and watching, and my admiration and love and respect for stepmoms in particular is at an all-time high. Because what happens with our kids, like they get off the court or at a cheer competition, whatever they're doing, they get done and they come running to mom and dad. And what the kids do is they run to their dad and then to their mom, or to their mom and then to their dad. Step parent is always third. That's got to be painful to know that your best is the bronze medal. Like, you will never be first or second, and you have to put in the same amount of work, same amount of effort to get third.
Yeah.
You wouldn't go into the Olympics. You wouldn't compete if you knew your best option is third place. Yeah. And you have to put in as much work as the guy who's going to win.
Yeah.
We wouldn't do it. But stepmoms do that every single day, and just it blows my mind.
Yeah.
The work they do, for what they get in return, and for the most part,
for the bronze medal.
Yeah.
I felt like it was my fault, that I made it harder on my mom growing up, because, her trying to get us back, but it never happened. And going outside one day early morning, and I wanted to play outside. I just, wanted to be a kid. So I remember getting on this yellow and red wheeled tricycle, made out of plastic and things. And I was kind of riding it by the road. And a car came by and was really close to getting hit. And the car pulled off to the side of the road and got out, and they were yelling and screaming and where's your parents? I'm calling Child Protective Services and da-da-da-da. Of course, I didn't know what that was at that time. And it was within the, 2 weeks that my whole life changed.
Yeah. You're 30...
I'm 34.
34 now.
34 now.
So you're telling me this is 34 years old. You've struggled kind of with that whole thing all these years, looking back and going, well, some of it's my fault.
Yeah.
So can I have permission to just, shoot. Sorry.
Yeah.
I think the reason I think the reason I get emotional is there's nothing that makes me more angry than to see kids hurt. But this is the life I want to speak into you with that,
Right.
Andrew. And you don't need to hold that. You know, I would beg you to let that go. As a 6-year-old in a healthy world, in a healthy situation, you're not having to hold the responsibility of keeping a family together. It's not your responsibility as a 6-year-old. That's a mom and dad's responsibility. Mom and dad should be protecting. So, man, I just want to say, Andrew, I will be praying, and I hope to God you can release that and let that go, because it wasn't your fault. No 6-year-old has that responsibility. We make 2 mistakes as humans. Either we don't recognize the inherent good in humans. Like you walk down the street and you just realize so many people do so many great things, so many good things, and we miss that. Or the other extreme is we don't realize how evil humans can be.
Yeah.
And you in these books, in your story, in your life experience, witnessed at the same time the most beautiful side of humanity, where your parents and others in the resistance were willing to lay down their life for other human beings. But then you also witnessed the depth of depravity of humanity as well, right? You saw them both at the same time.
Yeah.
Because this is so sad to me that we've had, in fact, it's been going on for a few decades now, where some are saying, well, that never happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you say to someone who would claim that the Holocaust never happened? That it was some kind of conspiracy made up?
I had my book, Resistance on a Bicycle, in the back of my car. And I picked up 2 guys that wanted to go to the airport.
Yeah.
And they saw that book and they say, oh, you're a Nazi because of the...
Yeah.
And they started harassing me, saying, oh, you're a Nazi, and Trump, what do you think of Trump? He's a Nazi too. I slammed on my brake and said, get out, right on the freeway, get out. So that's my reaction.
Yeah, you're not a...
That's absolutely horrible.
Yeah.
And that's happening at the universities with all these rioters.
It is.
And that is because they have not read my books.
Yeah.
And any history is hardly taught in schools anymore.
That's another thing.
Yeah.
As Vietnam veterans, we appreciate the thanks to your service. Okay, where's the welcome home?
Yeah.
We didn't get any welcome home. We really appreciate you the same way.
Absolutely.
We appreciate welcome home, and vets on vets. First thing comes out of our mouths is welcome home.
So that's really good for us to hear, Danny. Those of us that didn't serve, or even people that have served that maybe that weren't in combat, you appreciate hearing not just thanks for your service, which I always try to say when I see someone with a veteran hat on, but to hear welcome home.
Yes.
Because especially for Vietnam vets, especially maybe the younger audience may not understand this as well. I certainly understand it because that's something we heard constantly growing up, that you didn't get that. Like a lot of you came home and people were against the war. And unfortunately, what happened at that time period is because they were against the war, they were also against the veterans, and then you didn't get welcome homes, correct? It's so sad that what you guys went through over there, and then to come back to that kind of reception. I mean, having fecal matter thrown at you and being told to get out of your uniform when instead the uniform should have been something honorable.
Sergeant stripes and spit shine boots and everything, and you get out and then...
Yeah. So that's good for us to hear. When you see someone with a veteran, especially a Vietnam veteran, make sure you take time and say thank you for your service. Welcome home.
You bet.
That's real nice.
I wish we could come up with a different term than racism. I hate that term. Here's why I hate that term. And again, this is coming from a faith-based perspective, someone who believes the Bible. The Bible teaches that humans were created in the image of God and we're the pinnacle of God's creation. Racism doesn't make sense because there's one race. There's the human race. I think that word even incorporates racism. Racism incorporates racism because there's one human race. Now within that human race, the beauty of God is he created different ethnicities, and there's different cultures, and there's different languages, and there's different colors, and the beauty in all of that is But when we start throwing around the term racism, which I don't know of another word, so maybe you guys can help me come up with a new one. I wish we could change that word, because it seems to only influence our thinking to think like you're a race and I'm a race. No, we're not. We're one race. We're human race.
I think one of the things that come from the various races is the division, and because you have racism, because you have different races, you can have division. Once again, we're talking about the church, because we have different denominations, we could also have divisions. So I think that, I don't know if everybody could handle everybody working together. I don't know if everybody could handle that. But if we did, I tell you what, we'll be a lot better off as a people.
Yeah.
As opposed to you take what's yours, I take what's mine, and the individuality of it. But I think that if we work together as people, as humans, as the human race, I think whatever his best interest is, whatever your best interest is, and I can benefit both of you, I'll do it, as opposed to I'll help him because he's black, I'll help him because he's white.
And that's oh man, that's a great point, Berth. That's a great point, because again, if we start, the starting point is so important. Or terminology, again, if you start with Native Americans means savages, if that's your starting point, that's not going to go in a good direction. If we start with there's different races, that's not going to go in a different direction. Which one's more advanced? Which one's going to go? No. If we start with there's one human race, and within that there's these cultures, and that actually now we can go, okay, we're from the same human race. We're both humans, but you're going to have a different lens you look through because of where you grew up, the time you grew up, the family you grew up, than me. And now we can have dialogue about that. Maybe you can help me understand yours better, and I can help you understand my perspective better. But we're starting from the point that we're both humans.
The most critical thing you can have in your relationship is a shared mission. Your values and your mission should be aligned. And too many people go into a relationship and there are things that are not aligned. Your mission is not aligned. And we'll say, well, you know what? This person's so sexy, and maybe the physical intimacy is amazing. So we'll say, maybe that's not that big a deal because we like all this stuff, but you're looking at the short term and not the long term. And what happens is people will go ahead and get married when there's a fracture, missions are not aligned, that values are not aligned, and you don't have this shared mission, that those things start to fester up. And what happens is a lot of people are really good at ignoring them for years and hoping that they'll change and that they'll get on course. A perfect example we've seen. And what are these things? Money is a big one. It could be how we spend our time can be a big one.
These are things that you would say are shared mission or shared values.
That's right. Yeah. Political views are a big one. Kids and how we're going to raise kids are a big one. Where we want to go in life and what our end state. Are you savers or spenders, and how does that process happen? These are all things that need to be identified early because they become major problems.
And a lot of times we marry someone who is, maybe they have the same values, but we're a little opposite on it, like so spender or saver. One of those. A lot of couples are opposites, right? Like one couple's like, hey, we got some extra money, let's go spend it and make some new memories. And the other one's like, let's save it for a rainy day. But if you have a shared value, you can kind of work through those.
That's right. You can compromise on where you're going to meet in the middle. You can decide what are we going to do and how do we do it, and that becomes training.
Yeah.
So that is the training phase.
Yeah.
And the training phase never ends, because the Jason Redman my wife met is very different from the Jason Redman 10 years after we met, and very different from the Jason Redman today.
Oh my goodness, I'm so glad. I got to pause for a second here and just time. I'm so glad you brought that up, because here's a big pet peeve of mine. Whether you agree with getting married young is good or bad, I don't care so much. But the argument I always hear, I'm bringing this up because I got married young. I got married at 19. We've been happily married for 33 years. Had to work through a lot of stuff like all couples. But a lot of times people will say like, well, don't get married young because, you're going to change. And I always want to jump back and go, you're going to change. I don't care if you get married at 30. At 40, you're going to be different than you were at 30.
That's right.
So as a couples, you're going to be working through, both of you changing and morphing, and that's just part of being married for very long.
Like love is definitely, I would say, a verb, an action.
Yeah. Well, even from a biblical perspective, it is an action verb. It absolutely is. Like God loved us, so what did he do? That should always, if I love Shar, it should be followed with, okay, then what am I doing? So it is absolutely an action. But I think that this is why I would again encourage the audience to go take that test, because what you need to learn, and this is is what does she need though? Not what I think she needs, or vice versa. Like, what do I need to feel valued and respected, for her to feel cherished, which really are the two big love languages of men and women. Men want to feel respected and women want to be cherished. We know that because God told us that. But what does she need to feel cherished? And the love language test kind of tells you that. For her, it's acts of service and quality time. If I can give her a lot of words of affirmation, which I do because it's natural, but it has a 10% impact compared to an act of service.
This is one of the hardest things for people to believe. So I wouldn't take brain cancer away. I am a better father, husband, friend, cousin, brother, everything right now. And I wasn't trending in that direction. Like, I had really, the world's tough, the world is tough, and the business world. And so, and for me, I had believed too much of the Western, philosophy of, hey, this is, you got to go do the most stuff and accomplish and get to that highest place on the mountain. You wanted to be president, when you were a little kid, and now it's, got to be CEO of the biggest company you can find. And so I look back and I say, oh, Lord, thank you so much for, allowing this brain cancer, but for it to not take me, because the last 4 years have been the best 4 years of my life.
2,000 years ago, the greatest theologian and philosopher said, I learned the secret of contentment and happiness. I came with nothing, I'm leaving with nothing. So anything above that, you will have a plethora, thousands, tens of thousands of opportunities in the next coming weeks and months, that there's something above the baseline of nothing, right? Yep. You had a good meal. That's worth being happy, choosing happiness, so contentment. You saw a sunset. You looked at your spouse, your significant other, your child, your grandkid, whatever it might be, but it's above the baseline of nothing, which is worth then being content or happy about. And I think too, the psalmist, 3,000 years ago, the psalmist wrote this verse, "This is the day the Lord has made, I will rejoice and be glad in it." And you remember I texted this to you the night after we had this conversation around the fire? And I go, Brandon, I think I thought of the verse that sums it all up. This is the day, not yesterday, not tomorrow. Part of our problem with happiness and contentment is we're looking at the past, which we can't do anything about, or we're worried about the future. But the psalmist says, this is the day, this day. And then he says, I will rejoice. I will. It's an act of will. It's a choice. You're a trainer, like you train people right in the gym, and you know that how much is connected to like discipline, right? You're just making a choice. You can make a choice on what you're going to eat. You can make a choice on whether you're going to get up and go to the gym. I think happiness is the same way, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely.
Like it's an act of will a lot of times. Like I'm not going to miss this moment because this is above the baseline of nothing. I came with nothing. I'm leaving with nothing. So right now I'm going to choose to be happy. I think what you and I are wanting to do is right now as we launch into 2024 to say to our audience, to ourselves, let's make sure that we resolve, because we're doing resolutions, resolve that during the day you make a choice to find those many, many things that you're going to have that are above the baseline of nothing, and then choose happiness, choose contentment.
Thank you for making 2024 such a meaningful year for the No Gray Areas podcast. Stay tuned for more new episodes and incredible guests coming in 2025. And don't forget, follow us at No Gray Areas Gagliano on Instagram and TikTok. We'll see you next year.